Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the stories that brought you here. It's the podcast dedicated to the stories of the people from Pender Island, British Columbia. I'm your host, Chris Wakaluk, and I will be sitting down in one-on-one hour-long conversations with current Pender Island residents to find out what brought them to this funny little island we live on, and to also hear the stories that brought them to the point that they're at in their lives right now. Today, I will be speaking with Todd Bullitt. Now, a lot of you might know Todd as the humorous and helpful guy who works at the hardware store. Today, we're going to get to find out a heck of a lot more. We're going to get to hear stories from Todd about his time working for the Coast Guard, his experience with volunteering for the Pender Island Fire Department. We're also going to get to hear Todd talk about his passion for burning pallets. Anyway, I had a lot of fun doing this interview, had a lot of laughs, and I hope you get some chuckles too. Here is my interview with Todd Bullitt. Todd, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, Chris. Thanks for having me. Just feel really weird about this whole situation.
Yeah? Yeah.
No, I think it'll be fun. I'm just, while you're talking there, I was just looking around the room. There's so much things to touch. Like this thing here, what is that?
It's a stone sculpture I made a year ago. And so it's actually representative of two people climbing stairs together to reach a pinnacle. So that's what that's doing there.
And there's about 75 small stones there, and each one you're not allowed to touch, right?
No, you can't touch any of those.
It's tough in here.
Actually, you can touch them all, but just figuratively. You know what I mean? Just like with our conversation, we'll be touching each stone as we climb together.
That's going to be cool, man.
Yeah, right
I'm
on.
into that.
Okay, well, thanks for coming in. It's great to have you here. And we'll get started off with the first question. The first question of the podcast is, what brought you to Pender Island?
Man, it's such a great kind of series of circumstances. So my wife, Deb, we met in Victoria, and at the time I lived out in Souk, and she lived in Victoria, and we kind of, as we were learning about each other, she mentioned that she'd spent a lot of time growing up on Pender, and that her folks are still here on Pender. They own the hardware store. Her grandparents are here, and at that time, we never really thought much about it. I didn't know where Pender was, even though I lived in Souk. And she kind of didn't really even know where Souk was. So we just kind of came from these places that neither of us had explored. And, just the way the world worked, we moved to Richmond. I got a job working for the Coast Guard in Richmond. And it was kind of a big transition I was thinking about it on the way here, there was a group of people. We got hired in this big group, and there's a handful of people that were from Vancouver Island, and there was, a handful of people that were from the Lower Mainland, and you could tell like everybody from the island kind of missed the island life. It was like almost like a culture shock. So spent some time living in Richmond, and just got to the point where Deb was like, I got to get out of here. I need to go back to somewhere, more like the island. So she started up the nursery over here, and I took some leave. Hillary was just born, my daughter, and so I could take some time off to be at the nursery and be with Hillary and Hayden, and just kind of be a dad for a little bit. And it kind of transitioned to the point where she's like, I think we should live on Pender. And that was kind of interesting because I didn't work on Pender. I worked in Vancouver. So we made this arrangement to commute. I worked 4 days on, 4 days off, and I got a little basement suite in Vancouver. Kind of the best of both worlds. I had the family over here, and I go over there and work and live in this little suite. I knew right from the beginning, like when I started commuting, that was kind of the beginning of the end. I'd seen a couple other coworkers do it for a little while. It was a tough go. So kind of in the back of my head, I knew that was where it was going to go, but I thought I'll just make the most of it for now until I can't handle it anymore. So I did. I commuted back and forth for about 2 years, and the kids were still young. It seemed like every time I came back to Pender, they looked a little bit older to me, and just everything kind of came together where Deb's parents were looking to retire, and I'd been at the station for about 5 years. It was like I needed some type of change. So her parents offered me a spot at the store, kind of take over what they were doing, and it meant I could be home with the kids, and that's kind of how it all worked together. So that's kind of what brought me to Pender. It was just kind of a weird series of circumstances. I remember thinking like, going back to thinking I don't even know where Pender is to living here full time. So that's how I got here.
Okay, let's just touch on a couple things that you mentioned there. You mentioned that you worked for the Coast Guard.
Yeah.
How did you get involved in that?
Oh, man. It's funny how things all come together. I went to dive school when he was really young. He's 15 now, but when he was really young, I was kind of at that stage in my life where it's like newly married, young son. And I was like, what do I want to do? And I grew up every weekend going to the beach with my dad, and he was a dive instructor. I was kind of a bit of a beach rat. Like I'd spend time like running around on the beach while he was teaching the classes and going out diving. And at the end of the dives, there'd be a little bit of air left in the cylinder. So I'd grab the tank and just kind of swim around, do my thing. And, it just kind of was a natural for me. And when I was 13, which is like your minimum age to get your sport diving ticket, of course, like that was the thing I wanted to do. So I turned 13, I got my sport ticket, and I didn't really do much with it after that. It was just kind of something to check off, I suppose, and to get it officially. And so when I was thinking about what I wanted to do with my life, I thought, well, maybe I should go into diving. Like it's just such a natural fit. And I went to this dive school in North Van, and they had a series of barges set up, these concrete barges. All the equipment was set out on there. And I was on the barge, and I can remember that day, this hovercraft came like just ripping by, and I'd never really seen it before. And I was like, what the heck are they doing? I had this crusty dive instructor, the kick-ass handlebar mustache. And he's like, oh, those guys are, they do public safety diving. Like same thing. I was like, what do you mean by that? And they pull like people out of the water, like pull them out of the cars and this and that. I was like, gross, man. I'm never doing that. Like never, right? Finished the training, same thing. Like during the training, it was like, whatever you do, man, try to get a good job with a commercial company. Cause when you get out, it's like, you're either going to go dive on a fish farm or you're going to get a good commercial job. And I learned the hard way. I said same thing, like I'll never dive on a fish farm. So sure enough, I got this job on a fish farm in Tofino right out of dive school, and I was up there. It's funny, like looking back on it now, like the diving was amazing. It's just beautiful, clear, like crystal clear water, like amazing visibility. Just diving to the bottom of this fish farm all day, every day, picking up dead fish, mending nets and stuff like that. And by fluke, they got a disease kind of was rolling through these fish farms. So like every week the schedule would get cut and you'd see less and less divers until it was finally my turn. And I got cut out of the schedule. But just before I did, this friend of mine that I went to, when I finished dive school, I took this remote submersible course. So I took this course like piloting little submersible ROVs, and he called me up and he was at the station in Richmond, the Coast Guard station, looking for some work. And they weren't hiring any submersible pilots, but they were hiring some divers. And he just kind of dropped me a line saying, hey, if you're looking for work, this is happening. And of course, like a couple days later, I got cut out of the schedule. I thought, well, maybe I should go check and see about diving it for the Coast Guard. I had no idea like what the job was. It was just a public safety diving job, steady work. So I applied. By luck, I got in, and it was the same thing. Like I said, I'm never going to dive for dead bodies. And sure enough, that was it, right? Like that was what I was doing. So, just all came together for me working there. It was a full-time gig, really steady work, great equipment, like everything kind of in the diving world, like couldn't ask for a better job. The funny thing was I knew about diving, but I didn't know anything about being a mariner. So it was a weird combination of people. Like all the topside work is like you're on the water, you're being a mariner. So I had to learn everything to do with that. And the diving part I knew. So there's a cool blend of people, because a lot of people, they had lots of experience on the water, but they didn't know about the diving side. And then I had some dive experience, but I didn't know about the topside work. So it was a good blend of people. But I just kind of found myself there.
Well, I'm just curious about what it means to be a mariner. If you could just speak a little bit to that.
Oh my gosh, like. It's so funny because, there's so much history there, like rich history, and there's so many traditions for being a sailor and funny words and, like just kind of like the terminology is like, there's some romance there and there's also some quirkiness, just like all the different terminology for navigation and rigging and, reading charts and just all those things. I just had no idea. Like I said, when I applied for the job, I didn't even know it was on hovercraft. That was kind of a bonus, right? But when they hired, diving was just a little portion of it. I had to go through a medic training course. There's a rough water, like inflatable course they send you away to up in Banfield, and all these like other things that rounded out the job. So the dive training was intensive. Like it was 7 weeks of just diving every day, just like in the filthiest conditions. And the most challenging things, like you never saw anything. Like it was so zero visibility. You didn't see things. I remember going on one of my first dives in 5 weeks where it was outside of the Fraser River and you could actually see your hand. I thought, oh my gosh, this is amazing, right? So just kind of going from thinking like at the end of that dive training, okay, like we're done, the training's done, and going, wow, this is like just a small portion of what it takes to provide those services out in the coast was a like crazy learning experience. So, you know, it was a fun journey, but I feel glad that I didn't know what I was getting myself into, you know?
It's so amazing to get to hear like a little bit of a background about what's involved, because you might see, you mentioned about your experience about being a child and seeing a boat go by and just being like, whoa, what's that all about, right? So that's cool to hear that there's so much more involved. Like obviously there's a ton involved, right? Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, it was a weird journey, you know, like you just don't know where life's going to take you. And I think the fun thing I learned from that is never say never, because really everything I said I would never do, I ended up having to do for a living, right? Or ended up doing like as a life choice where life took me. So I'm careful to not say I'll never do that.
That's so funny. I just finished editing a previous interview this morning, and that came up a couple times in the previous interview. I think it's just where you put your focus, right? If all you think about is, I don't want this, I don't want this, I don't want this, then you're sending out energy towards that, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so you leave the Coast Guard to come to Pender, and then you join the family business.
Yeah.
Okay. Do tell.
Oh my gosh. Like, so we've talked about this a lot. Like, it's pretty fun to revisit this stuff because, you know, the Coast Guard job was something that I was really, you know, I was just so proud to be part of this program that was providing this resource to people on the water in the region. And to me, it meant like anybody that's in and around the Fraser River, anybody that's sailing on a ship off the coast here, if something happens, there's a team available 24 hours a day to go and assist you. And, you know, it was a tight group of like, you know, it felt like a brother, sisterhood kind of family. Everybody went through the same training to get there. They wanted to be there. And it kind of defined who you were. Like, you know, we talked about that a lot, where it's like people ask you about yourself. What you do is who you are, you know, or at least at that point in my life, it felt like that. It kind of defined who it was, being a rescue diver or public safety diver. And so when I came to Pender to take over the job, you know, it was the same thing where I just kind of jumped in like with both feet. Luckily, I didn't think too much about it ahead. But for the first little while, I was like, you know, I just realized all these skills that I had developed, you know, over the last 5 years with the Coast Guard, all the technical stuff just didn't apply. There was no submerged vehicles for me to help anybody with, you know, there was nobody like ripping their arm off on a winch. It was just, you know, I just felt literally like I was like out of my element. And it's the same thing, like all this new terminology and, you know, all these like hardened construction guys coming in every day. It was like I didn't have a clue what they were saying, you know, like I didn't have a clue what where anything was. It was just like a really weird time for me. And, you know, it kind of had like, I think it would be fair to say like a bit of an identity crisis. It's like, who am I? Like, what am I doing? Right? You know, it wasn't like I was having like a meltdown, like crying in the bathroom, but it was more like, wow, like I really am starting all over again here. And when I look back on it now, like I think there's a lot of life skills with jobs that are transferable, you know, like working in, you know, stress environments and, you know, working within teams, all those things, of course, are transferable. But it was the technical stuff that really overwhelmed me. And, you know, it was just kind of weird transitional time, like a couple of years of trying to find my footing and becoming proficient. Right. So like, I love the challenge, but it definitely felt like out of my element for sure.
Okay. So when did that change for you? What happened to create a bit of a change there?
You know, I think it was just time. I think part of it was time, just learning the business. You know, I was thinking about it before where I think it felt like a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, where it was starting to really get the hang of everything. Because the first little while was really about training in every position there, just getting an idea of every job. So, and I started out in the yard, which was, I don't know why, I just even still am fond of working on the yard, just because maybe it was where I started. Maybe it's just, even if you can't do 90% of the stuff there, you can still pick things up and put them down. Maybe that was the thing for me. But it just took a little while to like get a hold of the technical side of it. And then, like I said, kind of turning a page onto a new chapter in my life and like kind of coming to terms with that, but recognizing like this is a new journey for myself. So I think the combination of the two, like technically getting proficient and then just finding yourself in that job.
Sure. It's interesting because I worked at the hardware store for a period of time and worked with Todd, and we had a lovely time together. I certainly enjoyed hanging out for sure. And it is interesting because for people who are listening who don't live on the island, they may not have a clue as to what a crazy hub that place is for the community, because everybody goes to the hardware store and it's where people gather in a way. And and it was interesting because when I moved to the island full time, I got to meet so many people and have so many interactions, and it really opened my eyes up to who was living on the island, to what they were doing. It's kind of an amazing place. Yeah,
I totally agree. Like there's the amount of people that come in and out of that store every day just blows my mind. And we talk about this a lot, where it's funny because when you hire new people and it sounds a little like cliche where you're like, okay, like it's going to get busy, you got to hold on and just keep your head in the game, kind of these silly sports cliches. And everyone's like, yeah, I get it. And then, after the end of the first week or something, they're just like looking at you like, what is happening here? It's just so crazy. Like in the busy times of the year, it can get pretty hot in there, but same deal. Like I agree. Like it's a really neat hub, and you meet the most interesting people there. It just blows my mind. Like the people that walk through that door, some days you're just like, wow, like what is your story? So yeah, it's been fun, man. I really enjoy it there.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, let's swing things back to your wife, Deb. How did you meet Deb?
Oh man, this is embarrassing. So I lived in Souk at the time, and I had some friends who had mutual friends with Deb in Victoria. So if anybody is listening that has lived out in Souk, it's like Victoria seems like this big city, right? Like you want to get down to Victoria, you want to get out of Souk, you want to go into town for the night kind of thing. So we had some friends, some mutual friends. It was my good friend Cal. It was his birthday, so we were going to take him downtown, get him some drinks. And so by coincidence, we went to this cheesy nightclub. It's probably changed its name like 10 times since, but we sat in this booth, and Deb was there with her friends, and I was there with my friends. Of course, my friends had already like drank way too much. They had spilled drinks all over the table. Like we were making a really good impression, I thought, right? So it's like to smooth things over a little bit, because the drinks had like spilt over onto their side. And I started talking with Deb about, just kind of striking up a conversation with Deb. And that was our first conversation about how she has family on Pender, and, this is my group of friends from Souk, and how do you like us now kind of thing, right? So we just hit it off. Like we just had a really fun night, just kind of, just sitting in this booth, talking back and forth, just kind of sharing who we were with each other. And it just so happened to be that her birthday was in a couple of days, and she's like, you guys should come back down and come like meet up with me for my birthday. And I thought, why not? It was just kind of a fun thing. So that's how it all started. We seemed to really hit it off like right from the get-go, and it was fun. It was like country guy and like city girl. So I mean, everybody that knows the island, it's not that crazy, but it felt like that, and it was really fun,
Okay. It's interesting because you mentioned Souk. You've mentioned Souk so many times in the past.
Yeah.
And it seems like it really shaped who you are as a person.
Yeah.
And let's hear some Souk stories from you if you're willing to share.
Oh, man. I don't know if it was just the time of my life when I moved there. I moved to Souk when I was in grade 7. I don't know if it was a time of my life when I moved out there that really defined or kind of shaped and helped like my direction, but I grew up most of my life in the Lower Mainland in Port Coquitlam, which for anybody who knows out there is like, especially back then was pretty, rural. Like it's not downtown Vancouver. But the fun part was when I moved out to Souk, everybody in Souk basically thought I was a city boy. And so I thought it was hilarious because, if you knew Port Coquitlam, it's like, that's not a city place, right? But I went along with it just because it was better than nothing. And it was a tight group of people. When I started school there, it was like it seemed like they all like started in kindergarten up until grade 7 together. So it was like this tight group of people. It's like, who's this outsider guy? Never taken a school bus in my life. I can remember like the first day I was in grade 7, the end of the day, and school's let out, and I'm like wandering around like, man, I wonder how I get home. Like, where's this bus? And by then everyone was on the bus and had left. Like, I didn't even, get the whole scheduling thing. And so it was kind of an interesting first couple days, but Sooke was kind of a fun place because originally, it was a logging, fishing community, and the people that were in my grade when I grew up, they were kind of the last kids of those loggers and fishermen. So you had like some really like cool but rough upbringings. And then you had, at the same time, it was kind of this bedroom community. So you had lots of people that worked in Victoria that lived in Sooke. So you had this kind of like this convergence of these, this old culture and this new culture. So it was like, they were classy, but yet we still burned lots of pallets, lots of bush parties and fun stuff like that. So it was like, it just seemed like a little bit still of the Wild West. Once you get up into a logging road, it's like you can do whatever you want up there. So it was fun, man. I enjoyed it. And, I think like there's something kind of same deal. Like there's something transferable when you live in a small town. Like Sooke felt like a small town back then. It's like you can take that to other small towns and you kind of get it, right? So, but yeah, growing up in Sooke was a blast, man. We had, of course, like all kinds of like hillbilly kind of ways we did things. And, my friends and I we'd all take turns buying like a total beater car. I got one from my neighbor for a case of beer. And we just drive these cars into the ground, like just driving around, being just goofs with them. And then once they died, they just get towed to the wrecker. You just burn them in the middle of the, bush somewhere and go on to the next car. So it was like stuff like that was fun, man. When you're 17 or 18, you can just kind of, you're left up to your own selves to entertain each other, and you just get into some crazy times.
That's funny. Not environmentally responsible, but hey,
no, I do not advocate that. Don't do it.
Fantastic. Yeah. Okay, so shifting gears again here, just to touch on something that we talked about earlier, and it deals with the fire department, because you joined the volunteer fire department on Pender Island recently in the last couple of years.
You're right, Chris.
All right, fantastic. Good. Just needed to clarify that. I was trying to get my times right. But you recently received a couple awards, and this might be embarrassing to you, but I want you to tell us anyway about what those awards were and what that night meant to you.
Oh, man. Like if I could just go back a little bit, when I first got here, when I was first working at the store, I had this delivery that had to go up to the fire hall. And somebody warned me, like, be careful, man, when you're up there, because they're going to try to recruit you. And sure enough, I got up there and I was unloading this lift of wood or something. And the deputy chief came down and he, introduced himself and was like, so you think, have you thought about joining the fire department kind of thing? And, I was really flattered. I was, I was thankful that he asked. It was the same thing where I was like, I'm just getting started here. I'm just kind of learning the biz and I just don't have time to get involved with anything else. And the kids are young and, a million different excuses. And for me, it was just not the right timing. And a couple years ago, I realized like my kids are getting older, they're in their teens. And some days I don't even know if they really know if I'm home or not or care. And I was like, okay, this is a good time to get involved, right? So, I thought about it like for quite a while and I just wanted to get back to some of the emergency services. And one of the big draws for me moving to Pender was to be able to do some community work. And I hadn't achieved that. Like I just worked at the store and I was like, okay, I'm going to carve out some time here and get involved. And I had run into, of course, like so many members. And I just thought, man, these guys and girls are just like providing the service on a different level than I was expecting, just a really professional level. The training was really like top notch. And I thought, man, I want to get involved, right? So I joined. It was a little under 3 years ago. And it's just been a great place for me to just kind of for lack of a better term, like flourish. It just kind of my environment, doing the emergency services is so much fun for me, and getting back to what I really enjoyed about the Coast Guard, right? Getting out there and helping people and doing things that are a little more high stakes. And so, yeah, it's been a blast. Every year you do a fitness test, and there's a cutoff in the fitness test. It's like 5 minutes. A lot of people can walk the test in 5 minutes and pass. And it's a pass-fail test, right? No one has to do what we do. But of course, you want to see how fast you can do it. It's pretty grueling. I think it's grueling. You know, if you can get through it in a couple minutes, you're doing pretty good. So, you know, every year there's at least a handful of people that are just going to go leave it all out on the training ground and just go for it. And I know, like, for me, I try to get under 2 minutes, and it's the worst 2 minutes of your life. Like, it just feels like I wish I could throw up to get it over with. You know what I mean? And I ran it last year. I just left it all out there, and just by a little bit of luck, you know, just one extra step or whatever it happens to be, I got a really great time, and I won an award for that, which was super fun. And I wasn't expecting that, actually. I just kind of lucked out, I think. The other one that really meant a lot to me was the Firefighter of the Year award. And so we were talking about that, where they put it out to the membership to nominate somebody based on a list of criteria. And, you know, I was really flattered and humbled to be nominated by my peers for that. That meant so much to me, just for how much respect and admiration I have for the people that have been training me and putting time and effort into me to get that nomination. Felt great. It was a great night. And like I was saying too, I got a chance to wear my wife, Deb, her grandfather was the second chief on Pender. So I wore his Chiefs jacket to the banquet, and that was just a blast. You know, it's just like, it's a little bit outrageous looking. It looks like I should be going to a roller derby or something, but just to wear that in his honor was a super fun night. It was good.
That's nice. And I know through talking to you in years past that family really means a lot to you, and that your extended family, your family-in-law means a lot to you. So, so getting to wear your grandfather-in-law's jacket, because he's someone who has a lot of history on this island. Maybe if you just like touch on him, just let us know a little bit about him.
Oh man. Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I'm glad you brought that up, because sometimes like the line between, you know, your immediate family and then your in-laws, like for me, it's been so blurred. Like, you know, they've just treated me like one of their own right from day one. And to be able to kind of like reciprocate that is pretty special. And what I mean in that is like, following in Max's footsteps with the fire department and carrying on that tradition of like giving back to the community has been a real honor. And there's pressure there too. Like, the guy has done a lot to contribute to Pender, and to live up to that's been special. Max, he, you know, I wouldn't say he's pioneer on Pender, but he's like one of the earlier families here. Him and his wife, June, live, you know, most of their adult life here, contributing to Pender, being involved like with so many different boards and initiatives, and developing Magic Lake and donating land to the recycling depot, and all those different things that make Pender what it is today has been pretty special. And the guy's just for lack of like a better term, like a guy's guy. Like, you know, he's got the aviators, he's got has a glass of scotch in the afternoon, he's got his smokes. Like, he's just a real guy's guy, man. I've never seen him do this, but he's the kind of guy I think he could like smoke and play tennis at the same time. You know what I mean? So a really good guy, and always willing to help people out and pay it forward and like contribute to Pender. I think that's so cool.
All right, right on. And then just to tie off the fire department side of things, because I had a little bit of experience with it myself, because I joined and went through half of the training program, but I just realized it wasn't for me. But I really got to see a lot of the behind the scenes as to what goes on and the effort that's involved. And it really amazed me, actually, as to the extent of what I saw in my really brief time behind the scenes as the program for the volunteer fire department. And it seems pretty remarkable. It
is pretty incredible. I mean, it's interesting when you kind of put it into perspective, because you know, to imagine like a volunteer police service or a volunteer like ambulance service, like I don't think people can wrap their mind around that. But it's kind of commonplace in smaller areas where you have a volunteer fire service, and people are willing to like step up and answer the call, so to speak, that takes some serious stones some days, right? So I think it's pretty cool. And like you said, the behind the scenes work to coordinate all those people, like I like to jokingly call it like herding the cats. Like you put a bunch of type A people together and try to get them to focus on one thing is like, it's like its own challenge right there. So, to get people to come together, work on the same page and like provide those services is pretty cool. I think it's neat.
Right on.
Yeah, man.
All right. Moving into the second traditional question on this program that we're touching on, who has helped you along the way on Pender Island?
Oh man, I love that question. Like, I was thinking about it before I came over, and one of the things for me, it's funny because you're like unlocking the vaults of all these memories, especially when I first got here, the trauma of trying to like get going and figure out what to do. So it's like I put it all in the very back for the longest time. But the reason why I like the question so much is because I think it speaks to the nature, like the true nature of great Pender Islanders to begin with. And Pender is built on that cooperation and helping each other along. And I noticed like even in the business, it must have been obvious to those who I was helping, like just the kind of like the terror, fear look on my face. But there's so many great longstanding customers that we have that took time to train me on how to do the job, right? So that's incredible. I can think of like, and you and I all know all these people, but I'm thinking about like Esmond French. Not only will he come and ask for a part, but he'll tell you what the part's for and why they're using it, because you have no idea, right? You're just holding this thing like, just take it and go, right? So Esmond, to take time, stop and like tell me about these things, why he's buying it, what these parts are for, where they're going. And then just as a side note with Esmond, like he's one of my favorite oral historians of Pender. The guy has not only so much knowledge on like, where Pender's come from, how it got to where it is today and the people that were involved with that, but all the different pieces of tools and equipment and things along the way that we just kind of lost touch with, like using these things, the hand tools and the tough work it took to like live on Pender. That guy has so much great knowledge. Like he's a blast to talk to. I was thinking about Brent Marsden. Brent Marsden's like one of my favorite guys. Just taking a moment to stop and like explain the same thing, like just take a bit of time out of his day to help you do your job. And we're talking customers here, like they're already paying for the merchandise. Just to take a moment, like help you learn a little bit more and understand like the big picture of, where those materials are going, what they're doing with them. Brooke Baxter is a great guy. That guy's such a craftsman. And to take a second, just explain like same deal, like what he's doing out on the job site and the little things that make a difference, like in his building. It's still like learn things from Brooke today that really make a big difference, like helping the next customer. So unfortunately, like in some ways it's all work related because it feels like that's really what I did like so much the first little while that I got here. I had some acquaintances, like mutual acquaintances with the RCMP when I got here, just from my work with the Coast Guard. And that was a blast, just making some common like friendships. Ron Parker was a great friend of mine with the RCMP, and we did some fun things together. So it was like we kind of shared that same like take it to the next level type of attitude. So
what do you mean by take it to the next level kind of attitude? Man.
So here's a great example. When I met Ron on a call at one point, the hovercraft came over and it was a call, I think it was on Main Island, falling in the water, and there was a transfer anyways. I met him on Maine. We kind of recognized one another from Pender. And so when I moved to Pender, it was like, now we got time to hang out and do some fun stuff. And I'd been telling him about how I wanted to get into free diving. Because I was like, at that point in my diving career, I was wearing like, 60, 80 pounds of gear just to get to the bottom of the ocean and walk around. Like, when it came to like safety diving, a lot of the work you walk on the bottom, like you're looking for somebody, so you walk along the bottom for your search. So I wanted to get back to like this purest style of diving, and that to me was free diving. So the one thing about free diving is like you just can't do it alone. You can't push your limits of holding your breath going down to the bottom of the ocean without somebody there. So I saw Ron and I said, hey man, I want to get into free dive and you want to give it a shot. So of course he was in. You need kind of specific gear to free dive, but in the meantime, you can use the basic stuff. So we go out and kind of do what I would call like free diving, snorkeling, just go out and swim down to the bottom of the ocean, kind of learn like the nuances of free diving. And for me, it was like, especially like having grown up diving and then getting into diving for a profession, like it was a whole new chapter of diving that I didn't know was out there. And it was refreshing because except for like extreme commercial diving, offshore or something, I was like, I get the gist of diving, and I think like I've explored the different avenues of diving, and this was like a whole new realm, and it was kind of counterintuitive. It's like you're going to take your diving to another level by using far less gear and getting into your own head. It's a matter of like meditation. It's like where meditation and like athleticism hits the road, like where they meet. So we started freediving. It was like, as soon as we got into it, it was like, okay, now we need the proper fins. You can't use a scuba diving fin. You need like a 3-foot long fin. So it's like, okay, so we get these fins. Like, okay, now you need a proper weight belt, because like a standard weight belt, it just doesn't like shrink and expand as you go down to the bottom of the ocean. So it's like, we take it to that level. It's like, okay, now we need to go. Let's see how deep we can go. So it's like, as you're getting better and better at like meditating, slowing your body down and becoming efficient with your kicks, you're like going deeper and deeper. So it's like, it was a classic kind of type A thing where it's like, you're hitting 50 feet and it's like, oh man, we can hit 50. Well, what's 55? What's 60? Kind of keep going. So it's like, we went out on this dive one day and it was like, all the conditions were good. We were both feeling great. We were diving off a boat and it's like, you drop this anchor and you follow the anchor line down and back up. So we took turns like going deeper and deeper, and like Ryan came back up after this dive. He could kind of like sputter out the depth because he's out of breath. And I was looking at him, his lips were like as blue as could be. Like this guy is like brain dead practically, just high-fiving me because we were hitting 100 feet. And that was the kind of thing where it's like, you got that friendly competition, like pushing one another, and you can achieve like some amazing things. And the thing I loved is like you go down to the bottom of the ocean and because you don't have the equipment, like the regulators and the cylinders and all the clanging and the bubbles. It's like the most peaceful, you just got this kind of like, the pressure of the ocean around you, and all the animals aren't scared of you because you're not this weird, noisy thing. And it just took diving to a level that was like, almost a little bit spiritual. It was like I'd finish, a couple hours of free diving and just feel like absolutely centered and calm. It was the best. I loved it.
Nice.
Yeah, man.
It's really neat to hear about people's experiences being underwater and what the feeling is around that. Because I've never enjoyed it. I've never enjoyed being in deep water. But I'm always amazed to hear people respond so emphatically to doing that. And that like inherently within some people I've talked to, that it's just, like you say, spiritual.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I've always wondered, like I said, I just kind of grew up around the water, and I grew up swimming and doing all these, water related things. And I always I loved the water. I had like this Jacques Cousteau book when I was a kid, and I would read it like nonstop because he had like an underwater kind of like this scooter submarine thing, which I thought was cool. And then B, there was these underwater labs, which, as a kid, I was like, underwater house, like that's so amazing. And it just kind of was like a natural, I just love the idea of like being underwater and finding treasure. That was my motivation for diving to begin with. I just wanted to find treasure. And I was like, well, I'll just pick up some dead bodies until I score the mother lode, right? So it's it always seemed totally natural for me to I always loved holding my breath in the bathtub. I would just hang out and hold my breath for as long as I could. And so it's just kind of a natural thing for me. But I always wonder, they say we just have this dive reflex, this mammalian kind of dive reflex. Can everyone unlock that? Or is it just kind of some people are more in touch with it? I don't know. Who knows? I
don't know either, but it's interesting when you said finding the treasure.
Yeah.
I think that the act of doing it is probably the treasure that you're seeking.
Whoa, man. That's deep. I'm coming into the mic for that one. I agree, man. I mean, I found some fun things underwater, but the journey is the best part for sure. Some days you go out, I mean, not every dive is the same, but some days it just seems like you unlock a different access, a different part of yourself if you're doing some pretty fun diving, and that's cool for sure.
Right on. Yeah. And just to bookend the question about the people who have helped you. And so you mentioned Esmond, Brent, and Brooke, with people who come into the store and you interact with, and you're there to help them. But in turn, you're saying that they've really helped you. Big
time. And I think, that's Pender. It's just such a neat place. If I didn't have those experiences and I didn't have people like taking a moment out of their day, a selfless moment out of their day just to pay it forward, I just wouldn't know what I know today at the store, and I wouldn't have learned what I learned as fast as I was able to, thanks to people just taking a moment. And, I just feel like Pender's built on that. Like, people genuinely stop and pay forward, like we were talking about with the fire department. It's built on the backs of people wanting to give back to the community. And that's pretty cool, man.
Yeah, it's really cool. And you see it so many different places, or you don't, because I think that you have to look for it. Mm-hmm. Is that if you're not really tuned in and aware that that's what's taking place, you might miss it. Yeah. But I'll just use the example I thought of, Esmond bringing in some old tools for you. Yeah. I remember you showing me in the past, you're like, "Hey, Chris, what do you think this is?" I'm like, "Oh, I don't care. Get that thing away from me. I don't care what that thing is.
It's dirty."
But you had such an interest and such a passion for learning about that, and obviously, like Esmond, I'm sure caught on to that and like would bring more things in because you're showing an enthusiasm for
sure. Yeah. And I think like it seems like there's a renaissance of it's kind of romantic to think of it, but working with your hands and these crazy hand tools and weird things that Esmond would bring in, and like rigging and like I would call like big boy stuff, you kind of forget like there's some hard work going on out there. I had got the chainsaw that Max used to use. It was a 2-man chainsaw. I think you might have seen it when you were there. And, it has like a 48-inch or 50-inch bar. And the thing's so big and so heavy, like it takes 2 people to use the thing. And I remember talking to Max about it one day. And he was like, sometimes this guy, whoever worked with him wouldn't show up in the morning and have to use the thing on his own. At my age, I carried this thing in like straining to show it to him, thinking, this is unbelievable work these guys were doing. Trying to go to work with a 2-man chainsaw, having to do it on your own because nobody shows up that day. It's just like incredible stuff. I was talking to Paul Hampson one day, and he was telling me there was a logging camp over here, and they had a Swedish guy. I might have the facts a little upside down here, but they had a Swedish guy that he'd eat like a dozen eggs every morning for breakfast. They were logging like till sun up till sundown kind of thing. And it was a really bad winter, like super cold. And of course, like back in the day, like these saws wouldn't start that easily on a good day. They started a fire and they put the saws in the fire to warm these things up enough to start them and go to work. And I thought, man, that is hardcore. Like if I had a day like that, I'd be like, man, I guess we'll try again tomorrow kind of thing, And these guys are just going to work. So it was like, that's kind of my love of these old tools and equipment that people bring by. They seem to naturally bring them by the store for sure. But you see these things and you think, man, like we've come so far from that's why I say I think sometimes there's a bit of a return to like working with your hands a little bit, and this like renewed, how do you say it? Like people today are fond of like these blue collar, like trades workers because they're out there getting the job done kind of thing, right?
Yeah, totally. Moving into, thanks for, actually, you know what? I'm just going to say thanks for sharing that. It's good. Man. It's like nice to hear your enthusiasm about that. And it's great. I'm just going to throw in a little bit of an open question here because I know that from a day-to-day basis, your interests in things vary because you seem to be interested in a lot of different things.
Oh, you got it, man.
Yeah, where are you at right now? Like what are you thinking about right now? And what's tickling your imagination?
Oh, man, great question. I'm glad you brought that up, man, because I always try to articulate really what it is, kind of my motivation, but I like to use these cliche terms like hard chargers or like going down the rabbit hole. I've always been that type where, just a topic or a subject will like kind of catch my interest and I'll just devour it, like just try to learn as much as I can about it until I feel satisfied knowledge wise. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to go on to the next thing. And I've always kind of been that way. So I just find a topic and I feel kind of lost if I don't have something that I can just kind of almost, I'd say, healthy obsession, where it's like, I'm just going to learn and do as much as I can. And then once I kind of reach this point, I feel like I got as much as I can out of it. Then I'll just go on to something else. And we had that experience together, you and I. We were talking about this book, Born to Run. Do you remember that one?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's really a fun book because, there's some archaeology going on in there. There's some sports science going on in there. There's some cultural stuff. And it's like, for anyone who hasn't read it, the best way to describe it is like, it's a look at our history of our ability to run. And are we really meant to run? Because a lot of people today are like, man, my feet, shin splints, all these things, like we're just not designed to run. We shouldn't be running. So this book argues that we are, like we're absolutely designed to run. And so I read the book and I was like, I'm just going to start running, man. Like I'd made this breakthrough kind of running excursion with Scott, who I've been like working out with, and we were getting ready for the Tough Mudder. And so there's a lot of running involved with the Tough Mudder. And I never really, for anybody who knows like my workout interest, it's like, I like to lift super heavy. I think anything over 5 reps is cardio. I just like to go in and like see how much I can lift, right? So I had never really put much time into running because I thought it was just going to make me like wither up and disappear. So we started training for the Tough Mudder, and Scotty comes from a different background. Like he's got running in his family. Like it's a tribe of running people.
And just to interject, this is Scott Elliott you're talking about.
You got it. Yeah. Okay. So Scott had like kind of been this ambassador of running to me where he's like, no, you can do it. Like people can run. And I was like, no, man, it's just nobody runs as far. It's impossible. So I started running enough where it stopped sucking, and because I remember like going out on these runs and being like, man, when does this stop not sucking so bad? Like, it's just not very fun. I don't get it, right? So I started like getting to these points where I could start running, and it wasn't like, I wasn't waiting for it to be over. And then when I read this book, I was like, man, people really can run. Like, how far can I run? So that's what I mean about going down the rabbit hole. I was like, how far can I run? So I started doing like, maybe 6K, 8K kind of things. And we did a couple 10Ks to get, ready for the Mudder. And it was like, we started doing trail running just because it was easier and it was going to be more suitable to doing the Mudder. So we started doing these trails over here, and then it would be, got into like an obsession, like, well, how can we string these trails together to go farther? And so we started running 12Ks, and then we were like, I wonder if we can run from one end of Pender to the other end of Pender. So we called it the tip to tip, and which a lot of people just read into and think it's weird, but we went from Stanley Point, and just to back up, like anybody who knows me, like I can't go more than 15 minutes without eating. Like it just gets so hungry. So it's like my biggest fear, like anything on this run, was like food. So Scott, like being smart enough, like stashed food along the way. And we had food at the ambulance station. We had food down on Hall 3 on South Pender, and food in my pockets. I don't know what it is. I just can't go very far without eating. So we ran the North Pender to South Pender, and it was like, I can't remember, 20 something K. And it was like, holy moly, like what is my limit here? And just kind of being the sandbagger that I am, Scotty was out of town one weekend. Deb and the kids were away. I was like, I had a total unbooked night. And I was like, I'm going to run as far as I can run on Pender. I got no time frame. I'm just going to go for it. I had like tons of music on my phone and like this little like running, harnessy thing with like food in every crevice. And I just ran like as far as I could. And it was great, man. Like I ran up around Roe Lake and all through the campground, like just stringing all these different places together. And if you don't know my driveway, it's like so brutal. It's almost like it's under a kilometer, but it's all uphill. And I got to the bottom of my driveway. My legs were so torched. And I was like, I don't think I can make it up my driveway. Like, what am I going to do here? I actually like put my hands on my knees and like worked my legs to get up the driveway. I can't remember how far it was. It was farther than the tip to tip, but I was like, that's how far I could run. And I did a little bit of running after that. I was like, kind of like, that's it, man. That's my interest in running, and then I just kind of went on to the next thing.
What? Seriously? So you totally kind of quit running after that?
I just, pretty much.
Or let it go. You let it go.
I let it go. I just kind of put it aside, and I was like, I'll get back to that later, because I found it hard to like lift super heavy and run. Like it's almost like you can have one or the other in terms of like physically, and I think it's just my nature. Like I don't have the ability to like laser focus on more than one thing at a time. So it's like it's either going to be all running or all lifting, and I just kind of was like, I did the Tough Mudder, I felt great, and I was like, okay, next thing.
And what's the Tough Mudder for people who haven't heard of that?
Kind of like an obstacle course race. I think the one we did was 17 or 18K. There's like you run a little distance, and there's a crazy obstacle. There's filthy mud pits all over the place. There's like, ramps, things that climb up and over, things that go under. Like just, it's actually pretty fun, like a bit of an adventure race. And it was up in Whistler. It was a blast. So it was like the trail running was beautiful, just super fun time. I was I felt really conditioned so I could enjoy it. It wasn't like running through it, just going, oh God, when's it going to end? But it was a blast, man. Like, I would do it again for sure. And I should say, like, it's kind of funny because I hit that same point, like with the running that I did with the diving and we talked about that. I'd have these moments where it just felt like almost out of body, where I was just like, my body was running down the trail and my mind was watching it happen. And it just felt, not every run was like that, but I have some epic runs where I just felt like $1,000,000 at the end of it. It was just like a spiritual kind of thing. And then I gave it up.
That's interesting. So an out of body experience because like you're pushing your limits.
I don't know what it is. Like maybe it's just your body's trying to disconnect because it is painful. Maybe you're just like, it's a meditation thing where you just are so in the zone that the two separate. I don't know. It just felt great, man. And that's kind of what, like, once I started hitting those, that's when I could start really running like long distances and just kind of like get into the moment. Your senses change. It just felt fantastic. It was always like a trail thing. Like I really enjoy running the trails for some reason. I think it's just more like the natural connection, and it was just a blast. I had a blast with it.
Right on. You mentioned that you can't go more than 15 minutes without eating. I don't think you can go more than 15 seconds without cracking a joke of some kind.
Yeah, no joke.
And just to let people know, it was an incredibly awesome experience to get to hang out with you for day after day, because for those who don't spend that much time with Todd, everything is funny in Todd's mind. And there's always a joke to be made somewhere, somehow. And I would actually say you were probably the funniest person I've ever met, just because of the consistency, the relentlessness. And you are a comedic genius, I have to say. And I just want to know, like, what are your comedic influences?
Oh, man. Man, I'm like, it's funny that you asked that, because I was thinking the other day, like, I don't know, maybe it was a sign of the times or something, but I grew up in the 80s. Love a sitcom. Like, I think that was the golden age of sitcoms. My favorite things, and we talked about this a lot too, anything where you have a very special episode, Different Strokes, Family Ties, like, it feels so weird because, and that's kind of how my life has been, where like there's all these serious moments and then they're so serious that you're like, I got to take the edge off, man. You know what I mean? So it's like, I feel like being raised by the TV and watching so many different like sitcoms, like Punky Brewster and just like you name them. Like and not that the A-Team's a sitcom, but you got to admit it's pretty influential. And just kind of like catching all those different like setups, like classic comedy setups and like clean comedy. Like you had to really be funny back in the day to like get a laugh out of people, instead of just like dropping F-bombs and kicking people in the balls, kind of like, in the 90s, 2000 era stuff. So I think like even like Seinfeld, like I love Seinfeld because it's like such great writing and it's like witty, and same deal, like it's clever. Like you got to be clever to get those ones out there. But yeah, like for me, like serious times like make me feel really uncomfortable, and so I use comedy like take the edge off. And I seem to like, in the emergency services, like you take those moments to like take the edge off. Humor sometimes helps. Some people get pissed off about it, but I think it's funny to like just take a moment, like lighten up a little bit and make it easier on people. And then same with the hardware store, like some days they get a little intense and it's like, let's just like goof around a little bit and take the edge off. And so it works for me. And it backfires on me too, because when I'm trying to be sincere, people kind of are like waiting for the punchline. So that part, that's always worked against me. But I was like, I can tell you I don't know if it's a great story, but we went on a call once to do a recovery, and this poor soul just had gotten had kind of washed up in this area where it was really difficult to get to him. And there's only like some feet hanging out. And there's a 5-man crew to do these recoveries. But there's only 2 feet, right? So we had a game of paper, rock, scissors to like try to figure out who was going to do it. And just like taking a moment to like, and of course this is in like all in the private area, so it's not a public thing, but like just taking a moment to like lighten up and like leave it up to chance on who's going to have to handle that. It takes the edge off, right? I lost, so I got a foot out of it, but it worked out okay. But it just seems like there's some irony there where it's like you got such a serious situation and like you can take a moment to like lighten up. And I feel like this whole serious conversation is like not lightening things up.
No, well, actually, that's something that I think that I learned from you is that in terms of there's always time for humor, because I don't think I really bought into that before. And I love joking around. I've been a joker, most of my life, and if not all my life. And so I appreciate that. I've thought from time to time, I was like, oh yeah, I didn't used to do this, but Todd.
Well, I was thinking the other day, like, I can remember this time when we were working at the store and you were like fairly new there, and somebody had, this part cracks me up the most. Somebody had phoned and they asked you, this is probably like the 17th question today that you weren't equipped to handle. Somebody called and asked you for this part that you had no idea what it was or where it was or what it's for. And I remember you couldn't deal with it, and like you didn't hang up on the guy, but you finished it. You looked at me and you're kind of like, I can't help these people, I don't know what I'm doing here. And like it was like I knew, I was like, this guy is about to crack up and we're gonna lose him. And it was just like, okay man, don't worry, we can do this. But it was like there's a moment there where it's like, where you just see people and they're like, I'm about to lose my shit if you don't help me through this. And like we've all had those days. But it's like, it's fun to have a little bit of a laugh over it, but not during it. I find that it's not good to make fun of people while they're losing it. But if you can get them through it, it's okay.
While Todd was telling that story, I was laughing silently the whole time away from the mic, and I have tears in my eyes from laughing because I remember that well, and I remember him teasing me so much about it. But we have reached the end of our time together, Todd.
Oh, man. Yeah. It's been flying by.
I know, that went by fast.
Oh, my gosh.
Well, thank you for coming in. Any last words you want to part off with here?
Oh, my gosh. I don't even know where to start. I could go on for hours. Like, it's just so fun hanging out. And yeah, man, I think like these kind of conversations really make you think back and like to all the directions and people who've like shaped where you end up today. And it's kind of fun in a way. Like, I wish there's more people I could mention that have helped me and brought me to where I am today. Like, it's just a fun journey. You just don't know where you're going to end up. And Pender's such a great place to be. And I just love all the interactions like that are possible here. I was going to mention, I just felt like there's a kind of a suspicious calmness. We talked about this to your previous guest, Nia. I just thought that she was just so calm that it actually worried me a little bit, because I was like, when is she going to lose it? And, I don't know if it's going to happen soon, but when it does, it's going to be incredible. No, I'm just joking about that. But listening to her podcast, man, it just made me calmer than I've ever been. And I didn't like that feeling.
Okay, so you had to crank up some Motley Crue afterwards.
Yeah.
And, just get the white noise happening.
Go burn some pallets.
Good. All right, back to Souk burning pallets. Well, Todd, thank you so much for coming in. I really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Well, that was a pretty fun one. And in honor of that interview, I decided I would go to the north end of the North Island. And not only am I at the far end of the island, I've actually walked out into the ocean, and it's a beautiful spring evening. Very cloudy right now. It's blocked out the sun that's been shining all day. And the water up to my knees here. Well, it's cold, but not too cold. And the birds are very active right now. I can see Main Island just in front of me, just a little shot away. Thank you all for listening. Until next time.